Good morning, everyone. Happy Independence Day to you all. Hope you are all in good health and health. So, today is the second day lecture for the general physiology. We will continue from the topic that we have finished. So, for a quick recap, were we talking about in the last video? What we stopped with was osmolarity gap. Osmolarity gap. So, what was osmolarity gap? This is the difference between the measured and actual, or what we say, the calculated osmotically active molecules, right? That's what we learned. Now, there is a standard procedures for that, like a standard protocol for that, which postulates a formula through which we can measure the osmolarity gap. The formula is like 2 moles of sodium plus constant 0.55 of glucose. Now, this sodium value, it is calculated in milli equivalent per deciliter, and that of glucose is mg per deciliter. And then we add it up with blood, urea, nitrogen with a constant 0.36, and its unit is also mg per deciliter. So, by putting this formula, we can get the osmolarity gap. And what we have also studied, the normal value for this, the normal value is like less than 10 milliosmol per kg, right? Okay. Now, to understand its implication in the clinical condition, we would be understanding the two basic and primary transportation across the cell membrane. Now, see, for our understanding purpose, let's simplify and draw this cell membrane. So, what does a cell membrane have? Cell membrane is primarily made up of lipid and protein bilayer, right? It is made of lipid and protein bilayer. So, whatever comes to the cell has to pass through this bilayer, right? It has to pass through this bilayer. Now, there are primarily two types of processes by which the transportation across this membrane happens. The transportation altogether we will study bit by bit in the next section. But now in context to this osmolarity gap, what we need to know is that the two main types of transportation are the active mode of transportation, and the second one is the passive mode of transportation. By the definition, we know that in active sorry, transportation, we need energy, and in the passive transportation, no energy is needed. In our interest of understanding the osmolarity and how it is impacted clinically, we have to go ahead with the passive mode of transportation. Okay. Now, passive mode of transportation, passive transportation, it is of two types. First one is the diffusion and second is osmosis. Okay. Now, again, this diffusion is of two types. One is the simple diffusion, another one is the passive diffusion. And both this diffusion and osmosis play a vital role, a major role in the transportation of various substances across the cell membrane. And both are clinically very, very important. Now, this we will understand one by one. So, to start with, we begin with diffusion. Okay, so first is simple diffusion. So, how do we remember simple diffusion? Again, let us draw a simplified diagram of the cell membrane. Say, this is the cell membrane. What happens in the cell membrane? Substances, molecules that has to be diffused, or by simple diffusion, the substances that has to come from one end of the cell membrane to the other end. On one side of the cell membrane, what we have? We have the ECF, right? On the other side of the cell membrane, we have the ICF. So, when there is like just simple passage of this molecule from the ECF to the ICF, totally depending on the concentration gradient. It is the transport of substances depending only on concentration gradient. Okay, this is called as the simple diffusion. Here you see there is no need for any energy in any form. There is also no usage of any carrier protein. This is the simple diffusion. Now, inside our body, within our system, where is this simple diffusion taking place? Example, a very good example of this simple diffusion happening in our system is diffusion of gases, that is oxygen and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the lungs across the alveoli. Now this alveoli, this is the unit for the exchange of gases of the respiration. So whenever we are breathing in air from the atmosphere, it gets into the lungs, and lungs has got many alveoli. Okay, so across this alveoli, when there is exchange, this diffusion of the gases, it does not require any energy, it does not require any carrier protein or any external support. Just across the concentration gradient, it is diffused. So this is the most common and very important example of simple diffusion that is happening within our system. Okay. Now, one parameter to measure simple diffusion is the diffusion capacity of the carbon monoxide. So, this is the tool. This is the method by which actually we calculate or we measure the diffusing capacity of a gas across the alveoli. This mechanism and all we will study details in respiratory system. So for now, just remember what is the benefit of this mechanism. Say for diffusion to happen, certain factors are very important. Okay, so if the patient or if the person who is having difficulty in the diffusion, the condition may be some condition related to the alveoli, maybe some condition related to the thickness of the respiratory membrane across which this diffusion of gases is happening. So to see if there is a condition that is affecting the normal diffusion of the gases across the alveoli due to any clinical condition or pathological condition, we use this parameter to assess that one. Okay. Second type of diffusion is the facilitated diffusion. Okay. Now, facilitated diffusion, this is a passive diffusion, of course. Of course, it is a passive transportation. Here, we need a carrier protein. So, here also the transportation is happening across the concentration gradient, but due to certain reason, we need a carrier protein. What are the reason for that? Reason for facilitated diffusion to happen in the body. The reasons are, number one, size of the molecules to be transported. Okay. The second reason is also solubility of the substances or molecules to be transported. Okay. And third is also the diffusion coefficient. Now, this third factor that I have mentioned, diffusion coefficient, it directly does not apply to the facilitated diffusion. How? Because diffusion coefficient mainly applies to the substances which is gaseous in nature. But here, how does it indirectly applies to the facilitated diffusion? Certain gaseous compound also aids the solubility of important molecules that needs to be transported across the membrane. So that way it relates. Okay. Now, if we have to draw this one in a simplified way, the facilitated diffusion, how would it look like? So, say this is our cell membrane, and this is the ECF, and this is the ICF. And let our hypothetical carrier protein, the transporter, be like this. Okay? This is our hypothetical carrier protein. And these are the molecules that has to be transported. Okay, so this molecule will come and bind in the binding side of the carrier protein, and then after change in the configuration, again ECF and ICF, again after change in the configuration, here you see there will be a certain flip-flop, and there will be, like you see, diffusion. Okay, via the carrier protein. Now, the bound molecules that was bound on this side gets transported across the cell membrane from ECF to the ICF. This is our facilitated diffusion. Now, the most common and important physiological transportation that is happening by this facilitated transportation are the number one, glucose transportation by glut protein transporters. One thing about this glut protein transporters, this glut protein, it is a transmembrane protein, carrier protein. Now, this glut protein, they have isomer like glut 1 to glut 13. These are the various isomers of the glucose transporting protein. Now, each of this transporter, they are specialized, or they are meant to carry the transportation to the various structures in the body. Okay. To mention a few, like this glut 1 transporter, it is present, or it is like abundant in the RBC, in the brain and placenta. Okay, how is the, or what is the clinical relation of it? Say, due to some mutation in the gene, this GLUT1 transporter has not been signaled properly. The GLUT1 transporter has some problem in the binding site, or structural integrity is not proper, and this glucose is not able to bind onto it. Then what will happen? Okay, so deficiency of GLUT1 will cause very small sized rain in infants right after birth, a condition which is called as microencephaly. Okay, the same child will also suffer from GLUT1 deficiency. Okay, and will eventually have retardation like mental growth. If we talk about the second isomer, that is the GLUT2. If there is mutation in this GLUT2 carrier protein, now there will be a condition called as Fanconi Bickel syndrome. Now, what is Fanconi Bickel syndrome? This is a congenital, this is a congenital glucose storage disorder. Okay. The Now the abundance of this GLUT2 is present in the beta cells of pancreas and liver. So these are the two structures where it is mostly present. Okay. Another very important isomer of this GLUT transporter is GLUT4. Now this GLUT4 is insulin, it is insulin dependent transporter, and this insulin dependent transporter, it is mostly found in the renal tubule. Now, if there is any deficiency of this GLUT4 transporter, will result in a very common disease that many people suffer, type 2 diabetes mellitus. Okay, these are the few examples. So from this, we can understand how important each and every this glucose transporters are. So there are like 13 isomers, and all of them are very important, and each and every results in some clinical condition if not present in correct structure or in correct quantity. Very good example of this facilitated diffusion is also like very good example of facilitated diffusion in our physiological process is the movement of water by the water transporter. Many of you, or maybe almost all of you, know the name of the water transporter or the water transporting channel. Yes, it is nothing but aquaporins, right? Aquaporins. So now there are there are about there are like 12 types of this aquaporin channels. Okay, rather 13 because it starts from 0. It is 13, not 12, it is 13. So it is like aquaporin channel 0 to all the way aquaporin channel 12. So total, how many are there? Total 13, 0 to 12. Okay. So all these are mostly this aquaporins are mostly present. This water transporting channels are mostly present in the kidneys, also liver, eyes, especially lens, to be very specific, lens of the eyes, intestines, brain, and acinar cells that secrete the digestive juice. So this passage of water through the aquaporin channel, they also follow the process of facilitated diffusion because they're using this aquaporin as a carrier protein, just like that of the GLUT protein we have studied. Now, what is the clinical implication? See, as I told you yesterday itself, each and every topic we will study in like very minor details. Okay, not superficially, so that you have a very good understanding and very good concept. That's why we are going in total details, not superficially. Okay. So, what are the clinical implications? The clinical implication is like, say for example, if aquaporine channel 0 is like deficit or absent, then the person suffers from cataract problem. Okay. Why so? Because because this aquaporine 0 channel is present in the eyes. That's why if there is any deficiency or any mutation that is affecting the number, shape, size, anything, then the affected person will suffer from cataract. Okay. Another example, like each and every channels are very important. Just another example for you is like Aquaporin 2. Now this Aquaporin 2 is most abundant, in the renal tubules. So any deficit or insufficiency of Aquaporin 2 channel will result in disease of the nephrons. Okay, so this is how the process of diffusion is important and the mechanism is important and its clinical relation lies as we discussed. There is a formula to measure this diffusion, which is the Fick's law. By this Fick's law, we can measure the rate of diffusion, which is integrated along with the factors governing it. How is it? So Fick's law of diffusion states that, or Fick's law, which is also in short called as the influx. It is the function of, it's a direct function of the membrane surface area into concentration gradient and an indirect function of the thickness of the membrane. Okay. Coming to this points one by one, which membrane are we talking about here? The membrane is the membrane across which diffusion takes place. What example did we study in context to that? Where does diffusion takes place? Mostly, very importantly, obviously, example, diffusion of gases across the alveoli, right? So that membrane, the membrane of the alveoli, that is a respiratory membrane whose structure we will study in the system. So for here you understand the membrane around the alveoli, in which alveoli is also a part, if the surface area of that membrane is larger, then the rate of diffusion will be more, it will be faster and more. If the area is small, then obviously the rate of diffusion will also be slower. Okay, this is the membrane part. Now the second part is the concentration gradient. So what do we mean by the concentration gradient? Here, concentration gradient means the difference in concentration of the molecules to be diffused, okay, on either side of the membrane. So how do we understand this one? Just for better understanding, let us dot the cell membrane again. Say this is the cell membrane. This is case A. Okay. So see here, suppose these are the molecules that has to be diffused from ECF to ICF. Of course, with the help of the carrier protein. Okay. So here you see, this is your case A and this is your case B. Okay, again ECF and ICF. Here you see the same molecule. So now in case A, we see the number of the molecules. So here you see the number of the molecules that is present in the ECF. It is not so much higher than that of the ICF. Here you see, if we count, there are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here there are like 4, right? Though the ECF has more concentration, but still the difference is not very high. Whereas the same thing here you see, there are like 6 molecules on the ECF and on the ICF there is only 1 molecule. So here, where will be the concentration gradient bigger? Where will be the difference in the inequality in the concentration be more? Here, case B has bigger concentration gradient. Okay, so this is the meaning of the concentration gradient. Like larger is the concentration gradient, more will be the concentration, more will be the rate of the influx. The rate of influx will be more. It will like diffuse faster at a very fast rate. Okay. Coming to the third factor of the formula, that is the thickness. So earlier, the first two parameter, what did we see? The membrane surface area and the concentration gradient, they are directly proportional to the rate of the influx. This thickness of what? Thickness of the diffusing membrane. So thickness of the diffusing membrane, this is inversely related to the rate of the diffusion. Means what? If, say for example, say this is the diffusing membrane. Okay. Now this is say case D and C and this is case D. So this is like another diffusing membrane. So where is the thickness more? Here the case C has more thick diffusing membrane compared to that of the D. So the speed of the diffusion, the speed, the rate of diffusion will be faster in D. Similarly, just like the example we took, if there is like diffusion of like gases across the alveoli and due to some pathological condition the thickness of the alveoli increases, then the rate of the diffusion will become slower. Okay. So these are the three factors as per the Fick's law that determines the rate of diffusion. Okay. In the formula which we use to calculate. Coming to the determinants of diffusion. So, what are the determinants or determining points in a diffusion? First is the lipid solubility. We know that is a our cell is nothing but a fluid mosaic structure of lipid protein bilayer, right? That is what is the cell membrane accepted structure, right? Okay. So substances like carbon dioxide, oxygen, alcohol, all the substances, they are all lipid soluble, right? So this lipid soluble substances, they can easily squeeze through, they can easily pass through the cell membrane. Okay. Whereas, whereas like substances like glucose, they are bigger in size also, and they are what? They are lipid insoluble. They're lipid insoluble. They don't dissolve in lipid. So they cannot, they cannot diffuse through the cell membrane. This is one factor. The second factor is obviously the size of molecule. So substances or molecules which are small, like small molecules like the anions, cations, or even smaller amino acids, because they're so small in structure, whether they're lipid soluble or not soluble hardly matters. Because of their small size, they can easily diffuse. They can easily diffuse across the membrane. Whereas bigger substances like the cell protein, cellular proteins, right, or even the hormones, which are also obviously proteins in nature, because they are bigger in size, they cannot diffuse. This is one very important factor. Third determinant, third determinant is the temperature. So how does temperature mean? So optimal diffusion happens at normal body temperature, which is about 37 degrees Celsius, right? Now, in case of hyperthermia, hyperthermia increases the diffusion or increases the influx, that is the speed of diffusion. If hyperthermia increases the speed of diffusion or the rate of diffusion, obviously hypothermia or less temperature will decrease the influx, obviously, right? So these are the important determinants of diffusion. Now, we have spoken so much about the facilitated transportation, facilitated diffusion. Now, facilitated diffusion and simple diffusion, there are certain factors, physical factor, kinetic factor that govern them. Now, if I have to draw a graph showing the speed or the rate of diffusion of both simple and facilitated, it is something like this. On our x-axis, we have the concentration of the diffusing substance, and here we have the rate of influx. So, if it is simple diffusion, what does simple diffusion follow? As long as there is concentration gradient, there will be a linear increase in the rate of diffusion. Means as long as the concentration is increasing, the concentration gradient is more, the rate of simple diffusion will keep on increasing. Higher the concentration, bigger is the rate of diffusion. Okay. Whereas facilitated diffusion or facilitated transportation, it follows a different kinetics. It is carrier dependent, right? So initially, when the concentration is low, it also pretty much follows the simple diffusion pattern. It increases as long as the concentration increases. But after a certain point, this facilitated diffusion, it levels off. It goes to a plateau form, a plateau stage. Okay. And this plateau stage, from the beginning till the time it stabilizes, this area is called the V max. Why this is so? This is so because in case of facilitated diffusion or transportation, the Michaelis-Menten kinetics apply. Why does it apply? Because carrier protein is involved in case of facilitated diffusion. So carrier protein means what? There is a binding site. Now, drawing the graph only for the facilitated diffusion. If we draw the graph only for the facilitated diffusion, what we see is that initially when there is low concentration, with the low concentration, as soon as the molecules bind on the carrier protein, the rate of transportation, the rate of facilitated diffusion increases. More and more molecules bind to the carrier protein, more or fast, like the faster is the rate of the facilitated diffusion. But after certain points, the binding site gets saturated, the binding site gets exhausted, and it goes to a level of position. It kind of goes to a level of position. No longer can it increase the rate of transportation even if the concentration is increasing, even if the concentration is increasing. Here, the binding site of the carrier protein gets exhausted, which we call as saturation. So, saturation happens. Saturation means the carrier protein is like tired out. It cannot carry the burden anymore. So, after this saturation point is reached, no matter how much the concentration is increased, how much on and on you can increase the concentration, the rate of diffusion, the rate of facilitated transportation will still remain the same. Very good example of it, which all of you have studied and all of you know. It is the, what is the example? It is the glucose transportation via the glute carrier protein in the renal tubules, especially, very specifically, proximal convoluted tubule. Right? This is the thing that we have studied there also. So what happens here? After a certain concentration, after a certain concentration, the the transportation of glucose stops after its concentration in the arterial blood becomes 200 mg per deciliter of blood, and in venous blood it is 180 mg per deciliter. So what happens once there is saturation of the glucose transporter? Once the concentration of the glucose in the arterial blood becomes 200 and more, and in venous blood it is 180 and more. So after that, even if there is increase in the glucose in the blood, it never gets transported, rather it starts appearing in the urine. Right? This is what we have studied earlier also. Okay. Now, saturation is the one limiting point, right, for facilitated diffusion. Now, what is the other physical point that limits the facilitated transportation? The second one is the stereospecificity. Here, again, the d-isomer of glucose is transported only the d-isomer of the glucose is transported only by which protein? By glute, not the L-isomer. Means this, in this facilitated transportation, the carrier protein, they have a stereospecificity. Only of that specific isomer they will transport, not the one that they don't like. So the stereospecificity is also another factor that is limiting the facilitated diffusion. The third limiting factor is the competitive inhibition. What is that? We know on the glute carrier protein, glucose can bind, right? Or other glucose, or rather, so we know that on carrier protein, the glute protein, the glucose binds. Okay. Now, on the same glute protein, even galactose also can bind on the same glued protein. Now, in a condition, if the concentration of if the concentration of this galactose happens to be more than that of the glucose, then what will happen? Obviously, the galactose will not let the glucose bind. So, this is another determining factor of the facilitated diffusion. So, what are the three factors? The three determining factors are the saturation that we have discussed. Saturation is the first factor. Second factor is the stereospecificity, and third factor is the competitive inhibition. Okay, so Sethi Usman, you have written, you have asked about the notes, right? Yeah, I think so. Bhanu sir will definitely provide you guys with all this material. You can join his Telegram group and he will provide you with all the notes that has been taught in the class by all the faculties. Okay, you need not worry about it. Okay, so these are the factors of diffusion. Now, diffusion is clear with the clinical implications and all. Now, let us very specifically and with a very clear head understand the osmosis. Osmosis, you know, but what we have to focus on is the application of the osmosis, because it is a direct concept laying portion connecting to the clinics. Okay, to start with osmosis, we go by the definition. So, what is the definition of osmosis? The definition of osmosis, in a very easy way to remember, it is nothing but it is the movement of solvent. Okay, not the solute, it is the movement of the solvent. Now, here in our body, what is the solvent? In context to our body, the solvent is water. In context to physiology, thus we can say it is the passive movement. And passive movement also has got another term, that is diffusion. So, diffusion of water or passive movement of water across a membrane is osmosis. Okay. Now, a very easy way of understanding osmosis is what? Just the process of osmosis. I'm not talking here about the physiological connect or what happens in our body. Okay, just the process of osmosis. What is osmosis? See, this is a jar and it has got two compartments separated out by a permeable membrane. This is compartment A and this is compartment B. Let us assume that in compartment A there are this solvent, only water molecule, nothing else, only water molecule. Whereas in compartment B there are water molecule as well as there are some other solutes also. Okay, and let us assume that those solutes are like heavier than that of the water. And we keep this setup like untouched for few hours. So after few hours, what we see is in this same beaker, in this same beaker having compartment A and compartment B, the solvent has migrated from compartment A to compartment B, and no solute has migrated from B to A. So, the migration has been from compartment A to compartment B. And what moved? Only the water, that is the solvent, moved. Okay. So here, this is what is osmosis. Osmosis means the passive transportation, the passive movement or flow of the solvent from one compartment to another compartment. Okay. Now, how does this concept works in our body? In our body, yesterday we understood osmolarity. We studied osmolarity and osmolality. See, this is our cell. Okay, this is the ICF and this is the ECF. We know inside the ICF, inside the cell, there is fluid, right? And it has got electrolytes, and also outside the cell, there are like fluids and electrolytes and everything. The yardstick to measure or to understand the osmolarity is the knowledge of the osmoles, the osmotically active particles that we have understood. So, the osmolarity in normal condition, in normal condition, the plasma osmolarity is about 280 to 290 milliosmol per kg. Okay, the osmolarity. So this is what we call as the osmolar. Plasma means plasma, it is the fluid portion of the blood. So in normal condition, the plasma osmolarity is like 280 to 295. Somewhere you can also find 285, 300. These are all roughly the same. How does this concept aids us? The concept aids us in understanding solutions that are hyperosmolar or hypertonic and hypoosmolar or hypotonic. Okay. Any solution, any solution which is not inside the body but has to be infused or has to be compared to the plasma, if the or when the osmolarity is greater than 280 to 290 milliosmol per kg of plasma, any solution whose osmolarity is greater than the normal osmolarity of the body, we call it hyperosmolar or hypertonic. So tonicity has a slightly different meaning than osmolarity. We will come to that also. But roughly under the physiological condition, roughly we can use them as the same. There is no significant error in taking these two terms interchangeably, means taking the two terms as same. Okay, this is hyperosmolar. Now, what is hypotonic or hypoosmolar? Just the opposite. If the osmolarity is lesser than 280 to 290 milliosmol per kg, then we call it as hypoosmolar or hypotonic. Similarly, if there is any solution, okay, which is like same, then it is called isomosmolar or isotonic. Meaning what? If the osmolarity is same like that of the plasma. Okay, this is the concept. Now, this osmolarity, how does it help to maintain the integrity of the cell or maintain the uh, tightness of the cell, maintain the shape of the cell, maintain the hydrated condition of the cell? So, to understand that one, we will once again draw the hypothetical cell. See, this is our cell. Okay, this is the ICF. Why we have shown ICF with larger area? Because ICF is containing more body fluid, right? Compared to ECF, and this is the ECF. To understand that the osmolarity, the tightness, and also the hydration of this cell, we will hereafter understand the Darrow Yannet diagram that explains the hydrated condition, the osmolar condition, the physiological condition in various times when there is more intake of fluid or less intake of fluid, and the type of the fluid that we are consuming. Okay. So here what we will do is that we will draw the cell like this. On the right side will be the ECF and on the left side will be the ICF. Now this solid line, see I'm drawing once again, this solid line that I'm highlighting. Okay, the one, this one, the one, this is like vertical, this vertical line, they will mean, this vertical line, they will mean the they will mean the osmolarity. Okay. Whereas the horizontal line up and down, the horizontal line this one and the horizontal line this one up and down, it will mean the volume in liters. I repeat, we are drawing the hypothetical cell. On the left side, the component is the ICF. compartment is the ICF, and on the right side, the compartment is the ECF. Now, the boundaries that we have drawn on the either side, see the vertical line, the straight lines, okay, now they will represent the osmolarity, okay, osmolarity. What is osmolarity again? It is the amount of osmotically active particle, means how much osmol is present per liter of the solvent. Okay, here instead of solvent, it is the plasma. Okay, and this is in normal cells, I'm saying, in normal physiological condition. And this thick line up and down, what does it denote? It denotes the liter, the quantity. What does the quantity mean? We know in a normal 70 kg of a person, the ICF is how much? The ICF is about 28 liters. The ICF is 28 liters. And how much is the ECF? The ECF is 14 liters. So this is the volume. And osmolarity, what is the osmolarity? It is, say, 280 to 290 milliosmol. Okay. Here I am writing liter because we are going to talk in case of any external liquid that we are going to infuse. So this is the normal cell. Now you see, it is not that throughout the day we are just maintaining the same osmolarity and the same volume of water, same volume of fluid. See, sometimes we go to a place and we don't have access to water, but it is like, it's very hot. We are sweating. That time also there is loss of fluid from the body. Or we are very thirsty. We want to drink water. Okay. Now, when we drink water, instead of water, we think of drinking a lemonade, a juice, a nimbu pani kind of a thing. So when we drink that lemonade and all, it has water, but it also has sodium and chloride. Or say a person has a condition for which he or she has to take infusion of normal saline. Isotonic solution is usually normal saline. So this is also a condition. Or suppose a person is very sick and has thrown up, or is suffering, has ingested some contaminated food and is suffering from diarrhea. Then there is loss of fluid along with the electrolytes, along with other substances also. So these are the various conditions when the total body fluid of the body, they get altered. Okay, so when this change in the body fluid volume wise happens and also osmolarity wise happens, what actually happens to the movement of the water? Because as we saw here, now in this normal condition, there is no movement of water from ECF to ICF or ICF to ECF. But under certain condition, to maintain the blood pressure, to maintain the hydrated condition, there is like movement of the fluid from the ECF to ICF and also from the ICF to ECF. Okay, so what are the conditions we have to like understand? We will understand one by one. Now, let's start with the iso case or condition A. We'll understand with Darrow-Yannet diagram. Isotonic fluid. What is isotonic fluid? The most common isotonic fluid, it is saline, that is 0.9% NaCl, normal saline. Okay. Now what happens when a person is taking in normal saline? So let us draw the cell compartments again. So this is the ICF and this is the ECF. Okay, this is the ICF and this is the ECF. So here you see, when there is infusion of normal saline, which is like isotonic fluid, then what will happen? See, normal saline, it has got the sodium and the chloride same like that we have in the ECF, we have in our body fluid. Okay, but it does not have the protein or glucose or anything, but that does not interfere, that does not cause any much hindrance. So when there is infusion of this normal saline, that time there is no change in the osmolarity, because it is normal saline, it is same like that what we have within the body, the osmolarity is same like that we have within the body. So the osmolarity, which is the osmolarity line, the osmolarity line is the longer one, right? The osmolarity line is the straight one, right? So there is no change in the osmolarity. Okay, but after infusion, there is intake, there is incoming of more fluid in the body. So that incoming of more fluid in the body, what that will do, that will, you see, that will cause increase in the ECF. The ECF volume will increase. This dotted lines means increase in the volume. We know the vertical line that we are representing, it signifies the volume, the quantity in liters, right? So there will be expansion of the fluid. Where there will be expansion, the expansion will be in the ECF. But since you see it is osmolar, it is isoosmolar, there is no change in the osmolarity. So the ECF, the extra fluid that is in the ECF, it will not move to the ICF. So what are the characteristics that will happen? To write it out, first there will be increase in the volume in ECF, which we saw through the, or which we are seeing through the dotted line. The volume of the ECF is increasing, but no change in the osmolarity. So no shift, no shift of fluid from ECF to ICF. Okay. Now, what will be the consequence of it? Like if there is no change in the, no shift in the ECF or ICF, and no change in the osmolarity, only the volume has expanded. What will happen? There is blood that is circulating in our body. What does blood has? Blood has plasma and the RBC. RBC are the cells. Plasma has maximum quantity of water. So when there is more water that has come to the body, the amount of the water in the blood will increase. So now there will be increase in the blood volume. So anything that causes increase in the blood volume, what will cause? It will increase the arterial blood pressure. Okay, there will be increase in the arterial blood pressure. Another thing that will happen is the, see, when the liquid portion in the blood, it increases. Okay, just a quick recap that also you studied. I know blood, it has what? Cells plus plasma, right? And plasma has what? It has liquid maximally and solids minimally. So when this liquid portion additionally it increases, then what will happen? The blood cells will get diluted. Right, blood cells will get diluted, isn't it? Because now the liquid is more. So when the blood cell get diluted and we do a PCV, okay, or we do, the PCV is also known as the hematocrit value. When we do the PCV or the hematocrit test, what we will see? We will see the hemato, the hematocrit value decreases. I repeat, when there is infusion of saline, normal saline, what will happen? No change in the osmolarity, because the osmolarity is same like that we have in the body. That's why it is called isotonic, right? But the volume will be more. The volume will increase. Now, when the volume increases, the increase will be only in the ECF, because osmolarity is same. If the osmolarity was different, then there would have been movement of the fluid from one compartment to another compartment. So there is no movement of the fluid. Only volume has expanded. Volume has expanded means what? Blood pressure will increase because more amount of fluid is there. Now blood volume has increased because of infusion of fluid. So blood cells will get diluted. Liquid more, cells comparatively lesser diluted. So the hematocrit value will, okay, this is what will happen. This is like when there is isotonic fluid infusion. Now, second condition is like a person is like losing isotonic fluid. Now, when do we lose isotonic fluid? Whenever, for example, whenever a person suffers from loose motion, diarrhea, whenever there is diarrhea, there is loss of this isotonic fluid. So again, when there is, let us draw the diagram and see, when there is loss of the isotonic fluid, what will be the shift or the scenario going in the cell? So again, that is according to the Darrow-Yannet diagram. So what will happen? Okay, so this is our ECF and this is our ICF. Okay, so when we are losing isotonic fluid means diarrhea. When there is diarrhea, there is loss of electrolytes and loss of water in equal quantity. So it is loss of isotonic fluid, example diarrhea. Okay. In this condition, what will happen? Here again, since it is isotonic, the tonicity will be the same. There will be no change in the tonicity, right? The tonicity will be the change. The vertical lines will not shift. It will not go up. It will not go down. Only what happens is that there will be decrease in the there will be decrease in the volume. Now, when there is decrease in the volume from the ECF, see, it will be like that. There will be decrease in the volume. Now, this decrease in the volume will be from the ECF, right? Because it is going through diarrhea. So, the tonicity is same. There will be decrease in the volume. So, when there is decrease in the volume, again, the liquid portion in the blood will be lesser. Right? So when the liquid portion of the blood will be lesser, the total blood volume will go down and the blood pressure will decrease. The blood pressure will decrease. Writing it down, there will be decrease in the ECF volume. The body fluid in the ECF will decrease. No change in osmolarity. Now coming to the blood volume. Blood volume will decrease. Okay. And if blood volume decreases, what will happen? Means now opposite to the previous one. RBC is more and the liquid portion is less. So the hematocrit or packed cell volume will increase. Okay. I repeat, if there is isotonic fluid loss as seen in people suffering from diarrhea, then what will happen? No change in the tonicity, but there will be decrease in the ECF volume. So decrease in the ECF volume means decrease in the blood volume. Decrease in the blood volume means there will be decrease in the blood pressure, and there will be increase in the hematocrit value. Okay, this is what happens in context to the isotonic fluid losing or intaking, means gaining the C. Gaining hypoosmotic. Okay, hypoosmotic fluid. Now, gaining hypoosmotic fluid in the body is actually a clinical condition. When does it happen? It happens in conditions like when a person suffers from a disease, SIADH, syndrome of inadequate antidiuretic hormone. Okay, this is a condition where the ADH hormone, the antidiuretic hormone, is not functioning properly. Okay, it is like deficit. It is not being manufactured properly. Usually this happens when the hypothalamus has a problem. When the hypothalamus is having a tumor, or after a tumor there has been the tumor resection, resurrection after it has been operated out. Somehow the hypothalamus is not like functioning properly. So when this happens, then there is too much. When this happens, there is like too much of water retention in the body. Okay. So when there is too much of water retention in the body, what will happen to the cell? That we can understand with the by our Darrow unit diagram. So the diagram, if we draw here, it will be like this. Okay, again, this is the ICF and this is the ECF. So first, how will there will be shift in the compartments? Okay, so we are gaining hypoosmotic, means the body fluid has cations, anions, and water. But when the ADH hormone is working like inappropriately, too much, it is retaining, it is reabsorbing too much of water and very little of minerals. It is like water that is getting retained in larger quantity. So only water. So only water makes it hypoosmotic compared to the body fluid that we are having. So first thing that will happen, it will be that first the volume of the ECF will increase. Now, once the volume of the ECF is increased, the ECF has taken in more water. The ions, the cations and the anions that is present in the ECF, the body fluid part in the ECF, they are now getting diluted. So, when they are getting diluted, this is becoming less osmotic. This is becoming hypoosmotic compared to that of the ICF. I repeat, when there is too much of retention of water in the body, the water first, where will it go? It will go and accumulate in the ECF. So the ECF is first gaining more water. Now water is hypoosmotic. Its osmolarity is lesser than body fluid because most of the water is getting retained with minimum minerals, right? So it is almost pure water. So this water without mineral is making the ECF dilute. So when it is making the ECF dilute, this ECF, it is becoming less osmolar compared to the ICF. So now ICF, what is the nature of the solvent following the osmosis? Water moves from a region of lower concentration to a region of higher concentration. That is the nature of the water, opposite of diffusion, right? So water, now it will start moving from ECF to the ICF. This is how it will start moving. So the migration will start. The migration will start. Now, once water starts shifting from ECF to ICF, the ICF also start expanding. The volume of the ICF also increases. So here you see, after some time, the ICF volume becomes like more than the ECF volume. It is kind of like, let me try even. Here, the ICF volume increases even more than that of the ECF. Now here you see, both this ECF and ICF, they have become more in volume. They got diluted. They got diluted. So what will happen to the osmolarity? Here you see the volume is less. The volume is less, and also the osmolarity is also like decreased. The osmolarity has also decreased. It is not like this one anymore. It is not as tall as this anymore, right? Rather, it has decreased to this. So osmolarity of both the ECF and ICF, it decreases. It goes down. It is going down. It is only till this level. Till this level. It is not at all till this one like before. So in case of too much of water retention, what are the points that we can write for us to remember? There is, first of all, there is increase, there is increase in ECF volume, then shift of fluid from ECF to ICF, and then there is increase in ICF volume, right? And there is decrease in blood pressure also. Strikingly, there is decrease in the osmolarity. Now, why there is decrease in the blood pressure? The decrease in the blood pressure is mainly because the fluid is not staying much in the ECF. It is moving, it is shifting to the ICF. Okay, these are the characteristics that is happening. So we understood, when we are retaining too much of water, decrease in the osmolarity, but ultimately increase in the ECF volume. which compels the increase in the ICF volume more. Okay. The fourth case or the fourth scenario D, when losing hypoosmolar fluid. Losing hypoosmolar fluid. So that was gaining osmolar fluid. This is like losing the hypoosmolar fluid. So when do we usually lose hypoosmolar fluid? In sweaty summers. Example, sweaty summer. When you are sweating out. So when we are sweating out, we are not only losing water, we are also losing the ions, right? The cation and anion. All of us have tasted the sweat sometime or the other. It is salty. So along with water, with the sweat, there is also loss of salt. But that salt is not very high. It is not like too much of salt that we are losing from the body. Okay. So in this condition, what happens to the Darrow unit? The shifting of the fluid as explained by the Darrow unit diagram. Or what does it stand out to be? So this is the cell. This is the ICF and this is the ECF. Okay. So when we are losing out sweat, what happens? Whatever little bit of salt that is going out, though it is hypoosmotic, it is not like hyperosmotic. This loss of salt happens from both the compartments. The ICF also loses. So see here, the ICF also loses. The volume is like less, and the ECF also loses, right? So when both ICF and ECF are losing the salt, then what will happen? Automatically, there is increase in the osmolarity, right? Because water is going out more with little bit of salt, so volume is decreasing. Water is going out, true. Salt is going out, true. Yet not the lion's share of the sodium and potassium and chloride that is present in the body is going out. So when more of water is going out and less of salt is going out, then the osmolarity, what happens within the ECF and ICF? The osmolarity increases. It goes to something like slightly dehydrated condition. The volume is less, water is lost more, the osmolarity is more. That's why you see this horizontal line has gone up and the vertical line have come closer because of the loss of the volume of water. Okay, so here actually what happens, once there is a loss of water with little bit of or little bit quantity of salt, then the shifting happens from ICF to ECF as well as from ECF to ICF until and unless they are like stabilized. And what stands out to be at the last is like there is loss of water, ICF and ECF both decreases. Okay, osmolarity increases and the blood volume decreases. So if blood volume decreases, obviously the blood pressure also decreases. I repeat, when there is sweaty summer, we lose hypoosmotic fluid. What happens? Both the, because in hypoosmotic loss of the fluid, as seen in case of sweat, more water is lost, right, compared to the salt. So the volume decreases, but the osmolarity increases in both the compartments. So blood volume decreases and blood pressure also decreases. Next, what we have is, rather we write it as consuming too much of electrolyte rich fluid. Okay, say for example, you're someone who has a taste for lemonade. Okay, you like that salty taste, and you all of a sudden you decide to drink a lot of lemonade. So this lemonade is rich in sodium and chloride, right? It has got too much of this sodium and chloride. So consuming of too much of electrolyte rich fluid, what condition it is? It is nothing but intake of hyperosmotic fluid. Okay, so when there is intake of hyperosmotic fluid, what will be the Daroyanith explanation of the ICF and ECF that we have? It will be like this. This is the ICF and this is the ECF. So what is the scenario here? The scenario over here is that we have ingested too much of NaCl rich fluid, which is hyperosmotic. Hyperosmotic means it is more osmolar than the body fluid that is present. So first, when it comes at once, there will be increase in the volume of the ECF. So with the increase in the volume of the ECF, what will also happen? What will also happen? There will also be increase in the osmolarity, because NaCl is more that I'm ingesting. So all this NaCl rich fluid that has come, it will go to the ECF, right? So now the ECF becomes it becomes hyperosmolar than ICF. It becomes hyperosmolar than ICF. So when it is hyperosmolar means now it has got less water in the body fluid, less water in this ECF compared to ICF. So ICF has become more diluted. ICF has become more diluted. It has more water. So water will start flowing. This fluids will start flowing from the ICF to ECF. So after some time, there will be decrease in the volume of the ICF, but increase in the volume of the ECF, whereas there will be increase in the osmolarity of both the ECF and ICF. Okay, I repeat, if we are consuming too much of this NaCl, what will happen? It will come and enter the ECF more. Once it enters the ECF more, the volume will increase, the osmolarity will also increase. Once the volume increases, osmolarity increases in the ECF. The more dilute portion, the more water containing portion is in the ICF. So following the osmosis, again fluid will move from ICF to ECF. So there will be decrease in the volume in the ICF, but both will have more osmolarity. Okay, so the point that stands out to be here, ECF volume increases, ICF volume decreases, the osmolarity in ECF increases and fluid shifts from ICF to ECF. Now, what happens to our blood pressure? Here, the blood volume increases. Blood volume increases. Then what will happen to the hematocrit value? The hematocrit decreases and the blood pressure increases. Okay. Again, you see, too much of consumption or intake of this hyperosmotic solution will increase the ECF, increase the osmolarity, and decrease the ICF because fluid will move from ICF to ECF. Thus, blood volume, blood pressure will increase. Okay. The last of the cases, conditions, not cases rather, is like losing electrolytes. That is losing is loss of hyperosmotic fluid. So again, our cell ICF and ECF. Okay. Now here, losing hyperosmotic fluid. One clinical example is like Addison disease. Okay, Addison disease. Here the function of the cortisol is affected. So as a result of it, what happens? Let me write it. Addison's disease. So here excessive amount of sodium is lost. Sodium chloride, excessive amount of this electrolytes are lost through urine. So when this excessive amount of electrolytes are lost through urine, what will happen? First thing that will happen is the osmolarity of the ECF will go down. Right? Osmolarity of the ECF will go down automatically. Now, when the osmolarity of the ECF goes down, and also there is like loss of the water also along with this sodium and chloride, the volume also decreases. The volume also decreases. The volume decreases, the osmolarity goes down. So now the ECF becomes less osmolar compared to that of the ICF. Now ICF is more osmolar. So the water, the shifting of the fluid will happen from ECF to the ICF. From ECF to the ICF. Fluid will now move from the ECF to the ICF. Now, once the fluid starts moving from the ECF to ICF, the osmolarity of the ICF will also go down, because the electrolytes that is present in the ICF, it is also getting diluted. So, when there is too much of loss of this electrolyte through the urine, first the osmolarity goes down and the volume goes down in the ECF. Now, to maintain the balance, this ECF becomes less osmolar. So, the movement of fluid happens from the ECF to the ICF. And eventually, there is increase in the volume of the ICF, but increase in the volume dilutes the ICF. So, there is decrease in the osmolarity. So, if we write it down, it stands out to be the ECF volume decrease, the osmolarity decreases. Okay. Fluid shifts from ECF to ICF. So, ICF volume increases. ICF osmolarity decreases, right? As a result of which blood volume decreases and blood pressure decreases. But the hematocrit value increases. Okay, this is the Darrow-Yannet diagram, our understanding, implying or applying the applied aspect in the various conditions, both physiological and clinical conditions. So just go through it. At first, you might feel a bit not so easy, but if you understand the diagram, you will definitely be able to relate to it. So tomorrow we will continue with the other methods of transportation across the cell membrane. Okay, thank you and see you all tomorrow.